She said I was too young, but somehow, that was exactly what drew her to me. The first time I saw her, it felt like the world had slowed down just enough for me to notice every small detail. I was sitting in a quiet corner of the cafe, my laptop open but largely ignored, when her presence slipped in like a soft current. She moved with a grace I didn't expect, not hurried or showy, just deliberate and calm, as if she owned the space without needing to announce it. Her hair caught the sunlight streaming through the window, glinting with shades of gold and chestnut, and something about the way she brushed a strand behind her ear made me pause, my chest tightening with an unfamiliar flutter. When our eyes met, even briefly, I felt it, a gentle curiosity, an unspoken acknowledgement, like she had noticed me noticing her. There was warmth in her gaze, but also depth, a quiet intelligence that seemed to weigh the world in measured breaths. She smiled, not the kind of smile meant to charm, but the kind that hinted at lived experience, subtle humor, and hidden vulnerability. It was disarming. I found myself drawn to the way she carried herself, the understated elegance of her posture, the soft confidence that seemed to ripple outward without effort. She ordered her coffee with a calm, steady voice, and though I couldn't hear every word over the hum of the cafe, I could sense the melody of it, low, warm, and intentionally paced. Something about the cadence made me lean forward slightly, just to catch the inflections, the pauses, the small, almost imperceptible laughter that followed her own words. When she turned back toward her seat, our hands brushed lightly as I reached for my cup. The contact was brief, almost accidental, but it sent a small shiver through me, a strange awareness of proximity I couldn't shake. I sat back, trying to ground myself, but the quiet pull of her presence lingered. There was something intriguing about the subtle contrast, her calm, measured confidence against my restless, observant energy, her life experience, hinted at in the curve of her smile and the way her eyes softened with thought, against my own tentative curiosity. Even in that single moment, I sensed layers I couldn't yet name, strength, sorrow, a quiet playfulness hiding behind her serene exterior. By the time she left, slipping out into the afternoon light, I realized I had been holding my breath, unconsciously aware of the magnetic gravity she seemed to radiate. I knew then that this chance encounter was more than coincidence, and I wasn't sure whether I was excited or terrified by the pull I already felt, an attraction tempered by hesitation, deep curiosity, and a faint, irresistible sense that she might see something in me I hadn't yet seen in myself. It was unexpected, our paths crossing again so soon. I hadn't imagined I would see her outside that cafe, yet there she was, standing near the park entrance, framed by the warm afternoon sun. The air carried a faint scent of autumn leaves, earthy and crisp, and I realized I had been holding my breath once again, as if the world itself paused whenever she was near. She smiled, that same gentle, knowing smile, and my chest tightened with a mixture of anticipation and hesitation. We started walking together, the pavement smooth beneath our shoes, the park nearly empty except for the distant laughter of children and the occasional chirping of birds. There was a natural rhythm to our steps, unspoken but in sync, and I became acutely aware of the space between us. Every small motion seemed magnified, the sway of her hair as it caught the breeze, the soft sound of her voice when she spoke, even the subtle brushing of her coat sleeve against mine. Our conversation began lightly, comments about the changing season, the warmth of the sun, trivial things, but gradually, the words deepened. I found myself drawn to her perspective, the way she observed details others might overlook. She spoke with quiet confidence, but there was a vulnerability in her eyes that made me want to reach out, to understand, to connect. And in turn, I felt the cautious opening of something tender in myself, a desire to be noticed, to matter, even in the most subtle way. At one point, as we reached a small gate near a pond, our hands brushed accidentally while reaching for it. The contact was fleeting, yet electric, a warmth spread through me that was both startling and comforting. She didn't pull away, and neither did I. There was a moment of stillness, a shared awareness of each other's presence, before we continued walking, the moment lingering silently between us. Her laugh, soft and genuine, broke through my swirling thoughts, and I realized I had been watching her with a mixture of awe and nervous anticipation. I noticed the way the sunlight kissed the curve of her cheek, the gentle tilt of her head as she listened intently, the subtle scent of her perfume mixing with the crisp park air. It was intimate, yet entirely appropriate, a closeness that left me aware of both our differences and the strange, magnetic pull bridging the gap between us. By the time we parted at the park exit, I was acutely aware of a growing connection, something that went beyond mere curiosity. There was a promise in that afternoon, gentle, unspoken, and yet profoundly stirring. I felt it in the brush of our hands, the cadence of our shared laughter, and the quiet pull in my chest that urged me toward her, even as hesitation lingered, whispering of age, experience, and the delicate boundaries we were only beginning to test. The cafe had that quiet, cozy atmosphere again, the kind where the world feels paused, and it seemed almost designed for confessions. She had chosen the corner table by the window, where sunlight spilled in, turning her hair into a halo of soft, warm tones. When I slid into the chair across from her, there was a subtle pause, a fraction of a second where our eyes met and lingered, as though we were measuring something unspoken between us. The conversation started lightly, playful remarks about the weather and trivial missteps in ordering coffee, but beneath it all, I could sense the tension building, quiet, deliberate, and magnetic. She leaned back slightly, her gaze steady on me, a small, almost imperceptible smile playing on her lips. And then, without warning, she tilted her head, her voice lowering just enough to pull me in, and said, "You're young, but that's exactly my weakness." The words hung in the air, teasing yet sincere. My chest tightened in a way I hadn't anticipated. She didn't rush to explain or soften it, she let the statement settle between us, letting me feel its weight, its invitation, its quiet power. There was a playfulness there, a flirtation wrapped in honesty, but underneath it lay a vulnerability I could almost sense pressing against her composure. As she spoke, her fingers brushed lightly against my arm, not enough to be bold, but enough that the warmth lingered in a tangible, grounding way. I felt a flutter ripple through me, a combination of excitement, nervousness, and a dawning awareness of the emotional gravity of the moment. The brush of her hand was gentle, fleeting, yet it left a trail of sensation that seemed to echo her words. She leaned in just slightly, enough for me to catch the faint scent of her perfume, soft, comforting, subtly intoxicating. It wasn't just the physical closeness that made my heart race, it was the intimacy in her attention, the way her eyes seemed to study me with quiet amusement, patience, and an unexpected tenderness. There was a depth there I couldn't ignore, a bridge of unspoken understanding forming between us. For a moment, I struggled with my own thoughts, how to respond, whether to tease back, or simply sit with the tension. But the honesty in her words, the vulnerability beneath her playful tone, dissolved my hesitation just enough to meet her gaze steadily, acknowledging the pull between us without needing to speak it aloud. By the time our conversation shifted back to lighter topics, the air between us had changed irrevocably. That fleeting, deliberate moment, her words, her touch, her presence, had carved a quiet space where desire, admiration, and curiosity mingled. I left the cafe feeling both exhilarated and contemplative, aware of a new, delicate tension forming, a tension that promised warmth, connection, and the slow, irresistible unraveling of something neither of us could yet name. The next time we met, it wasn't by chance, though it felt like it could have been. She had invited me to her home under the pretext of showing me some old photographs from her travels. Her space reflected her personality, warm, understated elegance, soft textures, muted colors, and small details that hinted at a life rich with experience. Even the faint scent of jasmine lingering in the air felt intentional, calming, almost like a gentle invitation. As we settled on the sofa with coffee cups warming our hands, the conversation shifted from casual topics to quieter, more personal ones. She spoke of her late spouse with a softness that made the words almost fragile, as if holding them too tightly could shatter them. Her eyes softened, distant memories mingling with present moments, and I felt an unexpected tug at my chest, a mixture of empathy, awe, and a deep, budding affection. I noticed the subtle physical cues, the way her fingers lingered on her cup, the slight curve of her shoulders as she leaned back, the occasional brush of her hair behind her ear. Each gesture felt intimate, though entirely natural, and I realized I was studying her the way one studies something precious, careful not to disturb the quiet grace she radiated. She reached for my hand at one point, a fleeting touch that lasted just long enough to communicate trust without words. The warmth of her skin, the gentle pressure of her palm against mine, created a strange yet comforting sense of closeness. It wasn't romantic in the overt sense, it was deeper, quieter, but it left a lingering sense of connection, a subtle acknowledgement that we were both opening ourselves, bit by bit. As she spoke, her voice carried the weight of experience and the softness of vulnerability. I listened, captivated not only by her words but by the rhythm of her breathing, the slight inflections in her tone, and the spaces where she hesitated, allowing the past to surface. It was humbling and oddly intoxicating, the way she shared pieces of herself with such careful honesty. For my part, I found myself reciprocating, offering glimpses of my own life and insecurities. I watched her nod, her gaze steady, and felt a rare sense of being truly seen, acknowledged in a way that was tender and unspoken. There was no rush, no pressure, just the slow, deliberate building of a bridge between two people learning to trust, to care, and to recognize the quiet pull of something deeper than friendship. By the time our meeting ended, I walked away with more than memories. I carried a sense of intimacy that was delicate yet undeniable. I was aware that our connection was growing, quietly but powerfully, and that each shared story, each fleeting touch, was weaving a bond neither of us could ignore. In that room, amid soft lighting and whispered confidences, a slow-burning warmth had taken root, one that promised depth, tenderness, and the unspoken potential for love. It was a rainy afternoon, the kind where the city feels hushed under sheets of falling water. I hadn't expected to see her, yet there she was, huddled under a small umbrella, a hint of laughter escaping her lips as she shook droplets from her hair. The sight of her, framed by the rhythm of the rain, made my chest tighten with the same flutter I had felt the first time our paths crossed. We decided to walk together to the nearest cafe, sharing the umbrella. The space between us was narrow, almost electric. I could feel the warmth radiating from her side, subtle yet undeniable, and every step brought our shoulders into accidental contact. Each brush of fabric against fabric, each fleeting closeness, carried a weight far heavier than the rain around us. There was a magnetism in the silence, an unspoken understanding that both drew us near yet kept us cautious. Her eyes met mine occasionally, glinting with curiosity, amusement, and something softer, an invitation wrapped in hesitation. I wanted to speak, to break the tension, but the words seemed inadequate, clumsy against the quiet intimacy that had formed between us. So instead, I walked in measured steps, acutely aware of every detail, the tilt of her head as she glanced at the raindrops sliding down the umbrella, the faint scent of her perfume mingling with the wet air, the soft warmth of her hand brushing mine as we adjusted the umbrella together. I could sense her hesitation, mirroring my own. The age difference hovered between us like an unspoken boundary, reminding us of the potential consequences, the societal perceptions we couldn't ignore. Yet, beneath the caution, there was a pull neither of us could deny. Her laughter, soft and deliberate, broke through my spiraling thoughts, grounding me in the shared moment. I noticed how the rain amplified every sensory detail, the brush of her hair, the quiet rhythm of her steps, the subtle warmth of her presence so close to mine. A flash of courage stirred inside me, and for a heartbeat, our hands brushed again, this time slightly longer, a fleeting promise rather than a question. She didn't pull away, and neither did I. That small, deliberate connection said more than words ever could, an acknowledgement of attraction, trust, and the delicate tension binding us. By the time we reached the cafe, both of us were aware of the unspoken shift. The rain had washed the streets clean, but it had also awakened something between us, a slow, deliberate pull of desire tempered by respect, hesitation, and curiosity. We sat across from each other, our glances lingering, fingers occasionally brushing, and in that quiet, rain-kissed space, the possibility of love, careful, respectful, and deep, stirred quietly, promising an intensity neither of us could yet name. Evenings had a way of softening everything, and that night was no exception. Her home was bathed in warm, muted light, the kind that made everything feel intimate without effort. We sat close on the sofa, the soft fabric pressing gently against our sides, and I became acutely aware of the space between us. It was narrow, yet deliberate, neither forced nor accidental. I could feel the warmth radiating from her, subtle but grounding, as if her presence alone could quiet the restless stirrings of my heart. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. There was only the quiet rhythm of our breathing, the faint tick of a clock, and the muted sounds of the city outside. Then she leaned her head against my shoulder, a small, unassuming gesture, and I felt the delicate press of her hair against my chest. Her warmth seeped into me, steady and reassuring, carrying with it an unspoken message, trust, closeness, and a shared vulnerability. Her fingers brushed lightly against mine, tentative at first, then more assured as she relaxed into the proximity. The connection was subtle, but it spoke volumes. There was no rush, no need for words. The touch alone conveyed the intimacy that had been building between us, care, admiration, and an acknowledgement of mutual desire. My heart beat faster, but not with panic. It was a measured, tender response, a recognition that what we were feeling was real, delicate, and worth savoring. She spoke softly then, her voice low and calm, revealing fears and uncertainties she had carried for years. I listened, captivated not only by her words but by the quiet honesty in her tone. She admitted her longing, the pull she had resisted, and the way my youth, my energy, my unguarded nature, had drawn her in. Each confession was a bridge across the gap between us, making the space of our age difference feel less like a barrier and more like a shared path we were cautiously exploring. I found myself reciprocating, confessing emotions I hadn't fully acknowledged before, admiration, attraction, and a profound sense of comfort in her presence. Our hands intertwined naturally, fingers lacing together as though we had always belonged in this quiet, suspended space. There was a lingering hesitation, yes, a faint shadow of doubt, but it dissolved in the warmth of mutual recognition. By the end of the evening, I realized something profound: the hesitation, the uncertainty, the slow-burn tension, all of it had led us here. Not to a moment of recklessness, but to one of quiet certainty. We had acknowledged our desire, respected each other's boundaries, and embraced the emotional intimacy that had grown between us. In that soft glow, against the backdrop of her home and our shared confidences, the possibility of love felt not only real but inevitable, tender, deliberate, and deeply, irrevocably human. The morning light was soft, golden, spilling through the trees of the quiet garden where we walked. The air carried the faint scent of dew and blooming flowers, and every step felt deliberate, as if the world itself had slowed to match the rhythm of our hearts. She walked beside me, her hand occasionally brushing against mine, not by accident, but with a natural ease that spoke of comfort, trust, and an intimacy that had been years in the making. Her laughter, light and unrestrained, carried through the garden, mingling with the chirping of early birds. I mirrored it, feeling the warmth spread from my chest, a gentle glow that made the air between us feel alive. Her presence had always drawn me in, but now it felt different, rooted, steady, a harmony that had grown out of moments of hesitation, whispered vulnerabilities, and quiet touches shared over time. We paused by a small fountain, its water glimmering in the morning sun. She leaned slightly against me, her head resting just at the curve of my shoulder, and I felt the subtle press of her warmth, steady and reassuring. There was no rush, no need for words. The silence itself was comforting, a language of closeness and mutual understanding that didn't require explanation. Her hand found mine again, fingers entwining naturally, a gesture that said more than any declaration could. As we walked slowly through the garden paths, I noticed the little details that had always captivated me: the delicate tilt of her head when she listened, the softness of her voice when she spoke, the quiet confidence in the way she carried herself. And yet, now, those qualities were tempered with a visible sense of peace, as if she had found a space where she could fully be herself without hesitation. That realization stirred something deep inside me, a blend of awe, tenderness, and unshakable affection. We spoke sparingly, allowing the warmth of our connection to fill the gaps. Every glance, every gentle brush of our hands, every small smile reinforced what we had slowly built together: trust, desire, and the quiet joy of a love that was respectful, patient, and profoundly human. The age difference that had once seemed like a looming shadow now felt irrelevant, replaced by a shared understanding of hearts meeting on their own terms. By the time we reached the garden's exit, the sunlight bathed us in soft gold, a fitting backdrop for the harmony that had settled between us. She looked up at me, eyes full of quiet certainty, and I felt a sense of completion I had never known before. No words were necessary. The touches, the shared glances, the closeness of our bodies, they said it all. We had navigated hesitation, attraction, and vulnerability, and now stood together in a space of mutual acceptance and tender love. That slow-burning warmth, carefully nurtured over time, had transformed into a steady flame, illuminating a connection that was as real as it was profound, and entirely ours. If this slow-burning story of love, trust, and unexpected connection moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever felt a connection that grew slowly, quietly, but completely changed everything?